is Douglas Crummins. Thank you for joining me again. Today we continue the reading of my first book called 10,000 Waves. We're on chapter 5. And leading up to chapter 5, we were just coming back from California, my first surf vacation and Aikido vacation to California. And now we came back home, and wasn't long after that that Maria and I decided to pack up everything we own and move back to the East Coast. So chapter 5 picks up there when we just pretty much moved back, and we were staying with Maria's parents until we found our own place. And we pick up with the text. When we arrived in Virginia Beach, life was good. I was 2 blocks from the ocean, and that was a lot better than the hour-and-a-half drive that I was used to in Houston. While we were in Virginia for the first few months, all I did was surf and play video games while I looked for a job. I really got into this computer game called Unreal. The game draws you in as you advance to the next level, and then the next level, and then the next. Soon I was playing the game so much that one day I wanted to finish that level instead of going surfing. And that's when I put the game down and never touched it again. My awareness helped me to realize no matter how cool the game was, surfing is always cooler. Awareness helped me to realize playing the game only involved pushing buttons. Sure, it exercises the mind, but it is not really healthy for the body and the soul. I started missing my Aikido family, and I visited a couple dojos, but it wasn't the same. Tai said I would probably be better off if I started my own school. And once I found a job and a house, I started looking for a place to teach. We had a really nice recreation center a mile from my new home, so I talked to the program director, and she liked my ideas. Within a few months, she arranged a wonderful place for me to teach. The room was large, and it was air-conditioned, with mirrors all around. We shared the room with a dancing studio. When they weren't in there, it became an Aikido studio. The floor was raised. It was a wooden floor with a rubber coating. We had foldable mats that were used for gymnastics, and they were available for our use with the raised floor. And our mats on top of it, falling and teaching students to fall was very easy. At first it was a chore getting the mats out. Sometimes I had 12 mats that made the school large enough for about 12 or more students. And sometimes I showed up for a class and the mats were not put out at all. Sometimes I had to hunt the mats down and find them and get them all set up and get the school all set up so I could teach the classes. I trained the recreation staff, and the mats would not only be ready, but sometimes they even put the mats down the way I liked them or the way I had asked them to. The showman wall, or our front wall, of the school was white with a large ballerina dancers painted across the whole wall. I had a picture of the founder of Aikido and a painting I made with the Japanese characters that formed the word Aikido. It was makeshift, but I had to make it do. I started every class by hanging these 2 items up on a handrail. And the adult class sometimes gave me grief about the ballerina dancers on the front wall, but I just smiled and took it with a grain of salt. The Virginia Beach Parks and Wildlife Department advertised the class in their monthly magazine, so I always had a constant flow of new students. The only problem was that the Park and Recreation Department would only allow the class to go on for 6 weeks. I encountered students to sign up for the next six weeks, and some of them did. Every 6 weeks, we would teach a class, and I'd have to start over or start fresh every 6 weeks. How much Aikido could I teach in 6 weeks? For the returning students, I would change up techniques. My previous Aikido teacher once said you would need at least 4 years to see every technique at least once. So I stuck to the basics of the footwork and the ukemi and the art of falling. For the most part, I would start a new class by telling the students that if they paid attention and gave me 100%, I could swing my bokken and my wooden sword at them as much as I wanted, and after 6 weeks, I wouldn't be able to hit a single one of them. I always emphasized to my students the philosophy of Aikido, the philosophy of no competition. I often started a new class by telling my students that the only person you have to be better than is yourself. I told them that you can compete in sports and academics, but in this dojo or in this school, we work together to push everyone in the class. No one was left behind. If someone did not understand the teaching, then everyone would help that person or that student. In Aikido, part of the ukemi is learning to roll. And some of the students could roll really great on day one, while others just had the hardest time with it. It took me almost 6 months myself to learn to roll beautifully. So I give it to all of my teachers and myself some credit, because after 6 weeks, almost all my students could learn to roll proficiently. One of my most embarrassing moments as a teacher was when I was teaching one of my students to turn and get off the line. When someone attacks, I just started wearing their traditional skirt called a hakama, and I started far back from my student. I raised my arm to attack him, and I started to run up on my student. And I tripped on my skirt and rolled smack head first into one of the walls, right into one of the full-length mirrors. I hit the mirror so hard that I was dazed. I could not get up. I just looked at my students and said, "Hakama is not for running." Ouch. I did not run over my student, though. He did as he was supposed to. He turned and avoided my attack. My students were really amazing. One would think that they would be laughing their tails off, but then they ran up to me and helped me to get onto my feet again. Remember, we are all working together. Teacher, student, it didn't matter. We were all in this together. In the tradition of and respect for my previous sensei, my adult class started off with about 10 minutes of sitting in the Japanese posture known as seiza. This part of the class was spent on learning subjects like Aikido's history and my Zen stories. Americans are known in Japan as having bad manners, and they cannot sit still. And Tai would always sometimes sit us down for 30 minutes on a hard, worn-out mat. After 10 minutes, your feet would go numb. After 20 minutes, the pain was so intense you tried to subtly move your weight without anyone seeing from one side to the other. To me, the last 10 minutes of sitting became a meditation. I got past the pain and focused on the aura that surrounded my sensei and tried to pay attention to the subject sensei was discussing. Standing up after 30 minutes took some effort. Getting the blood to start flowing in your lower extremities was not so easy. I never really had a goal for the school. The only goal was that it was to keep me active in my art. I learned so much from teaching and especially from the kids' classes. Kids come to the Aikido school with their open minds, not knowing what to expect. And I learned that I was very patient and caring. I found out that surfing was not the only thing that I was naturally good at. I was always coming up with new ideas on how to teach a technique, and I learned a lot about myself. I kept teaching for over 6 years, and my sensei said, if you're going to keep teaching, you should come down and get come down and get your black belt. For several of the years I taught in Virginia, I came back to Texas for Aikido summer camp. My last visit to summer camp, my sensei gave me my shodan, my first black belt in Aikido. As soon as I put the belt on and started teaching, I met the most amazing Aikido instructor in Virginia that I'd ever met, James Baker. Sensei Baker opened a school in Norfolk, Virginia, about 30 miles from my house in Virginia Beach. I mostly visited his school on the weekends and occasionally, if my work permitted, an evening class, but this really helped me with my lessons at my school. James would teach me something, and then I would go and practice that technique with my class. James's style was very soft and very fluid. Some of the things he did were not available to the naked eye. You would have to be shown what seemed like the minutest difference made a big difference in the outcome of your technique. I probably did not earn my shodan the traditional way, but I feel I earned it after teaching for over 9 years. I practiced with Aikido of Norfolk from 2003 to 2006, and that's when James wanted to buy his own land and build a building in which to operate his school. He found a building shaped like a rounded aircraft hangar, and every single student helped strip the interior of the school. It was built out into several offices, but put a bunch of martial artists into a room and tell them to destroy the walls, and wow, within minutes there were no more walls. Another shodan and I looked at the drop ceiling and said, hey, if we raise this ceiling, we could practice our short staffs, otherwise known as the Jo. Long story short, I raised the entire structure by myself, using a bunch of string and ingenuity. I grew up around construction sites my whole life, So we made a rough sketch of the dressing rooms, and I went out and bought the materials. It was a rude awakening to find out how much I did not know about building structures, but everyone worked together, and we built the dojo. The most amazing thing we did to the dojo was to put in a raised floor that had 6 inches of foam blocks underneath the plywood, and on top of the plywood we had an extra inch of foam. Then the zebra mats were laid down to finish it off. When you were thrown down on these mats, you could bounce a little, and it was like a perfect dojo, probably the most perfect dojo I'd ever seen. Sensei Baker dedicated his life to Aikido, and it showed. If you ever get to visit Virginia Beach or Norfolk, Virginia, don't miss the opportunity of studying with Jim Baker, and just don't ask him to show you Yonkyo, the fourth teaching. If you do, don't say I didn't warn you so. James's Kokyo-ho was amazing. Kokyo-ho is usually taught with the sitting posture. An opponent would grab both of your wrists, and then you would try to throw your opponent. James once said it's all Kokyo-ho. First feel the wrist, then get the elbow, now the shoulder, but what I really want is your center, and then you were thrown on your back. I practiced with James from 2003 till the day I left Virginia. Saying goodbye to my Aikido family was difficult, and it pulled me apart. Jim said to me when I left, "Doug, we built a dojo together." It took me a couple of months, but I realized that what he was talking about was more than just sheetrock and 2x4s. The bonds we made, the friendships we made with all the students and our fellow senseis was very difficult to leave Virginia Beach and move back to Texas. Just as every king's court had a jester, I found my role in the Jim's dojo as peacekeeper. Sometimes the students who practiced became a little too aggressive or serious, and they would lose their focus. I like to lighten up the mood by telling a joke or saying the most off-the-wall statements. All the Udansha or the black belts helped fill in when James was away or could not be there. I filled in many times and tried to make the class educational, entertaining, and fun. One style of class I like to teach was to use the same attack and teach 4 or 5 defenses. Then for the last 30 minutes, have randori. Randori is when one defender wards off several attackers. I was decent, but not great by any standard. 2 things I was very good at were breath control and movement. This allowed me to avoid being captured and stuck, and being stuck having 4 attackers clobber me all at one time. Another thing I used to do as an instructor was if any of the other Udanshas, any of the other black belts showed up and I was teaching, I would schedule, we would each choose 1 or 2 attacks, and then we took turns teaching different defenses. Sometimes Steve would just see something I taught and showed the students other aspects of the defense or how we could turn it around into something totally different. It was a totally egoless class. I loved those expression sessions, as we called them. My new house was 7 miles from 2 of the best surfing beaches in Virginia. Most of the surfers who lived in Virginia Beach liked to surf at a place called First Street, probably the best wave in the area. The first time I paddled up into the lineup on my fun board, several people gave me funny looks. Not knowing anyone or much about the wave, I wasn't given much respect. First Street is a heavily localized spot. Still, I learned Japanese manners, and I love surfing there. I was respectful, and I knew I had to pay my dues. I had to earn my place in the lineup by catching the scraps that no one ever wanted, or sometimes hugging the shoulder. When I visited Virginia Beach 5 years ago, I surfed in the areas that beginners were more welcomed. Now that I had lived at the beach and I wanted to pay my dues and be accepted by the local surfers, I didn't care how long it would take. I wanted to earn my right to take off on that beautiful right-hand wave that the place provided. Living in Virginia Beach also made it possible for me to spend weekends down in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I made friends with a fellow surfer who loved to go down there to surf, and we spent every possible weekend out on the island riding beautiful waist to stomach high barrels. My friend did not like crowds, so North Carolina's Outer Banks fit him just right. On one trip down in the middle of the summer, we scored beautiful stomach high barrels all day long. The current was strong that day, and we figured that if we had drifted a mile or so down the beach, the dunes were large and they all looked the same, so we thought it was best to start walking back in the opposite direction that the current took us. We were both exhausted, mentally and physically, so we were a little disoriented. As we walked down the beach, we looked over and saw naked people. Not good naked people either. This is something I wished I had not seen. We crossed the dunes and realized that we had walked 2 miles in the wrong direction. We had to cross through the marshes to get to the road, and as we passed through the marshes, we were swarmed by hundreds of mosquitoes. It had to be at least 100 degrees out, and things were not looking good. We made it to the road and tried to hitch a ride back to my truck, but that wasn't successful. So we started walking, and no one would stop and pick us up. No one would stop and pick up 2 surfers carrying surfboards. I was amazed. After the first mile, we noticed some other surfers leaving the beach, and they were loaded up their car, parked on the roadside next to the marsh. I ran up to them and begged them to give us a lift as we were dying out there. They agreed to let one of us ride with them to the truck. I felt horrible leaving my friend there with the mosquitoes. As soon as I got to the truck, I squealed the tires and raced back to my friend. If those guys had refused to give us a lift, we would have been in real serious trouble. There's a story that I'd like to share with the world. This story doesn't have anything to do with surfing, but it's a tale of a fisherman, because the only people that ever came out to that island were fishermen and surfers. Anyway, this is a tale of a fisherman who would go fishing every day. He'd wake up really early every morning and gather his fishing gear. Then he would walk along the river's edge before the sun came up so he could catch the early morning fish. One morning in the dark, he was walking along the rocky banks of the river's edge, and he stumbled upon a bag of rocks. Not being able to see very well, he picked up the bag of rocks and put it in his pocket. The fisherman continued his trip down the rocky banks of the river until he reached his destination. Then he sat down on the river's edge long before the sun came up. Remembering the rocks, he pulled the bag out of his pocket. He opened the bag, and in the dark, he thought they looked like good skipping stones. So one at a time, he threw the stone and watched it skip away into the water's edge until it sank. He continued skipping the stones all morning long until he pulled out the last stone. And as he raised his hand to throw the last stone, the first ray of light of the morning sun hit the stone's edge and reflected a beam of light in his eye. He gasped at amazement as he became aware that the stone was a diamond. He was rich. Then he realized that the whole bag of stones were diamonds, and he could have been extremely rich. Bringing awareness into your actions is like that of the light shining on the diamond. What happened to me in Santa Cruz was only the beginning. Luckily, I was still very young enough to look at many things that most people thought were just stones, and I had found that life is full of diamonds. It just takes a little awareness to realize what is a diamond and what is a stone. And here's a story of one of my diamonds. My birthday was coming up, and Maria asked me if I wanted to go skydiving for my birthday. It was a scary proposition, but it sounded like fun. I always wanted to go skydiving. We checked out a local drop zone in the area, and they had what they called an accelerated freefall program, where you could fly your own parachute on your first jump. And that's what I wanted to do. A tandem jump was not as appealing to me. So we booked a class, and off to the drop zone I went one Saturday. The class was 4 hours long, and the instructors did a really good job of preparing you for every type of malfunction that you could encounter on your skydive. The instructors showed you how to fly and flare your canopy, which stalls it so that you can land it well. I remember them saying that the skydiving is all about thinking and being able to think when you need to. And this was not the same as surfing. This was new waters for me. I waited all day for my turn, and then for the last load of the day, I was manifested. The first thought that came to me was, I've got to pee. On my jump, I had two jump masters to ride up with me and fall with me. I was shaking in my boots and with nerves. And when we reached altitude and it was my turn to jump, I was even more nervous. There were butterflies in my stomach, and I was in the door of an airplane for the first time. The plane was cruising at about 90 miles an hour, and as I faced the oncoming wind, I thought to myself, I'm going to die, but screw it. I'm going to do this. The wind was so loud. If you want to know how loud, just stick your head out of the car window going almost 100 miles an hour, and then you'll know how loud it was. Add on to the propeller's loud whining, and you get an idea of how loud it was. Still, I wanted this experience. So we moved up into the door, and I clenched my hand around the frame of the airplane. Jumping out of the text a little bit, at the time the airplane we flew out of was a King Air, and the door was a single opening door. Only one and a half skydivers could fit in the door at a time. So back to the text. So we moved into the door, and I clenched my hand around the frame of the airplane. And yes, there was a moment when I thought I wouldn't be able to pry my hand off the frame with the crowbar. I remember seeing the sunset and how beautiful the skies were. And I checked in with my jump masters, informing them that I was ready to jump. But I forgot about the count. The count is a signal to let the jump masters know that you're letting go of the airplane and exiting for free fall. I checked in with my outside jump master, but I forgot to check in with my inside jump master. I jumped out with only one jump master with me. And wow, free fall was nothing like I expected it to be. It wasn't like falling at all. It felt more like floating than anything. It was so beautiful, and I didn't have any sensation of the ground coming really, really fast at me. The nervousness was taken over by sheer joy, and then I was able to think clearly. I was altitude aware, and I did my 3 practice pulls right on time. And at pull time, I pulled my pilot chute and waited 5 seconds and looked up, and I had a fully opened parachute above my head. Then the voice on the radio in the helmet said, Doug, 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 turn left, turn left. So I turned left. Then the voice said, Doug, 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 turn right, turn right, turn right. So I turned right. I had no conception of where the airport was located at. I didn't even really know what to look for. I just followed what the voice said, and before I knew it, I saw the airport, the landing strip. And the landing wasn't too bad. I just slid in on my tail, my first jump. I didn't land on my feet. I wish I could have said I did that, but unfortunately, I was a little clumsy and just slid in. The entire accelerated freefall program consisted of 25 jumps. And after your first few jumps, they take away the radio, and then you're on your own. And remembering what they said, skydiving is all about thinking. It stuck in my head. It is all about being able to think, but something was missing to me. Once I was under the canopy, it was like I had tunnel vision. And then one day I asked myself, I said, why are you not using your awareness? You are very aware in the water and on the mountain. Use your awareness in the air. So the next time I jumped, I brought everything together. Awareness, mind, soul, heart, and body. And now the jump was beautiful. And now God accompanied me in the air. Using my awareness, opened my eyes and took the blinders off. The blinders were gone. Love entered the jump. Skydiving now became a Zen experience. Most skydivers will tell you that you will never feel as close to God as when you jump. If you think about it, your entire life could be over in 3 minutes. If something goes wrong, 3 minutes is a very short time. If everything goes well, then it could be the best 3 minutes of your life. I brought Zen into my Zen awareness into skydiving, and I called it Extreme Zen. I'm not saying I created the term Extreme Zen, but that's what it came to me when I realized what I had done. I had given birth to something new. So just like the fisherman realizing that the last stone he had was one of the largest stones, made him rich. In fact, he was very rich, enough to live comfortably for a long time. But the realization that you go your whole life not knowing what is a stone or what is a diamond, because we don't have awareness to see those things at at that time in your life. There could have been other things going on in your life. Who knows? But without awareness, you're left pretty much in the dark, fumbling around, looking for the door, and not being able to find your way out. But anyway, thank you again for joining me. We'll pick up with the rest of Chapter 5 on the next reading. I think Chapter 5 was a little bit longer than I expected. So I hope you join me again for Chapter 6. We'll pick up again, finishing off all the crazy stories of my life up in Virginia Beach this time. Anyway, thanks again for joining me. My name is Douglas Grummins, and this is 10,000 Waves, Chapter 5. Y'all have a good day. Take care of yourselves out there, and be aware. Take care. Bye.